He's going to show us two tapes tonight. One of them is how was it built, and the other one is what makes it go so fast. It's quite an accomplishment on the Rotec. And it's a multimedia event. Max has got a controller over there that looks too complicated for me to figure out. But without further ado, we'll get going. And thanks very much for coming down, guys.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for inviting us down. As you know, we're going to talk about the AR-5. We have some videotapes. So we have 3 solid hours of edited videotapes. We're going to make you sit here through. No, just kidding. Let me show you how this can work. Yeah, where are the? Right here. That's good. Why don't we just to show you what we're going to do, we'll show you a little bit. Okay. I want to start out by talking about why the airplane goes so fast. Since we set the record, I've met Mr. Bruce Carmichael, who some of you may be familiar with. Bruce has written a couple of articles about the airplane, one of which is going to be out, I understand, in the October issue of Kit Planes magazine, and the other will be out in the July issue. July or August issue of Sport Aviation. In these articles, Bruce breaks down exactly why the airplane goes so fast. The main reason it goes so fast is because we've used laminar flow. We've used laminar flow not only on the wings, which everybody knows are very suitable for that sort of stuff, but we've also taken some cues from Mr. Bruce Holmes, who came out from NASA when I was working on an airplane in 1982 up at Reno called the Amsoil Rutan Racer, and some of you may be familiar with that airplane. They sprayed the airplane, particularly the wings and the forward fuselage, with some stuff called acinethine, which is a sublimating chemical, which will show you just exactly what percentage of the chord of the wing or the length of the fuselage is laminar. It shows the transition point between laminar and turbulent flow. What we discovered was that the flow on the Amsoil Racer wing was laminar back to 60% of the wing chord. That wasn't a big revelation to Bert Rutan, but it was a big revelation to a lot of people who, for many reasons, have not considered that laminar flow airfoils really work in the real world. But it turns out in our flight regime, in our speed range, the laminar flow wings, long laminar run wings are very practical. The reason laminar flow, of course, is so important is because it can have as little as 1/3 of the drag of turbulent flow. So just moving the laminar flow back from about 30% of wing chord, which is what you can get with a smooth so-called conventional airfoil, just moving it back from 30% to 50 or more percent, like I have, will cut the drag of the wing in half. So, startling thing. I mean, that's the drag of an airplane wing is probably better than 1/3 of the total drag of the airplane. So if you cut that in half, it'd be like going out and chopping half the wing off your glass air or your Lancer. If you could get it off the ground, it would be fast. So I don't have to, I can still get my airplane off the ground because I haven't reduced any of that wing area, but I have half the drag of a conventional wing. So that in a nutshell is what we've done to the wing. We've just used an old NACA 65 series profile. The 5 in the 65 means that the wing is laminar back to about 50% of the chord. The Bruce Holmes, B.J. Holmes study also indicated that you can get laminar flow behind a propeller. Well, that wasn't until 1982 really, I mean, no one had ever considered that. Everybody considers that the fuselages, because they're behind the propeller, are completely in turbulent flow. What Mr. Holmes discovered, incidentally, what I'm saying about Bruce Holmes is a little bit controversial. There are folks out there who believe that NASA faked the data that really you can't get laminar flow behind the wing, that they did the test wrong and that it's really not possible. That controversy is way over my head. That's for those guys at NASA to worry about. I read the NASA reports, and if it says you get laminar flow, I believe it. So I paid special attention to the fuselage behind the propeller, especially the leading edge around the inlet, and made sure that it was nice and smooth back to the gap between the cowl and the firewall. I'm assuming that the gap is enough to trip the flow, so I can't get laminar flow anywhere behind the cowl or behind the firewall. But what happens is, apparently, each time the propeller blade comes around, it disturbs the laminar flow. It becomes turbulent, but as the blade passes, the laminar flow recovers. So for at least some percentage of the time, that fuselage is laminar. Once again, if you can get any of that area laminar, you're reducing the drag of that area down to about 1/3 of its former value. So it's a big deal. So laminar flow is one of the reasons the airplane goes fast. Another reason the airplane goes fast, Max, if you'll roll up to 4049. Another reason the airplane goes fast is because we've paid special attention to reducing interference drag. What I've always thought of as interference drag is that occurs down in the corners of things. For example, the side of a fuselage and the top of a wing, where the boundary layers, these two boundary layers, get together and get mixed up down in the corner, and they beat each other up and wear each other out, so that the flow either separates early downstream, or it transitions from laminar to turbulent downstream. And the way you get rid of that is by just putting in a little filter. Well, read some articles and read some NACA reports, old NACA reports. I love them. Anything ahead of 1949 is just right where I want to be. That's where NACA did all the subsonic research. They quit after 1949. So I spent lots of time over at Ames Research Center Library, pawing through all that old stuff. What the NACA reports talk about is another kind of interference drag. That is something that happens behind the point of maximum thickness of the wing. I have been fortunate enough to have to work a little bit with a man named Irv Culver, who was an old Lockheed engineer, worked with Kelly at the Skunk Works, and has done lots of remarkable things with interference drag. And he does stuff with fairings. He talks about an airplane that John Thorpe originally designed that had such bad wing root interference drag that the airplane couldn't get off the ground until Irv came along and put a special fairing in it. But I didn't understand how to make the fairing. I didn't know anything about that kind of interference drag.
All set?
Max? So here's what we discovered. So that's interference drag.
Excuse me, have you seen,
Sir.
or did a nice piece of work on obstructions of interference drag on cowlings?
Who did?
Same thing. I don't know what he did, but he points out that if you go to the top of the cowling on an airplane, he takes a reference area, says that's drag here, puts it in different locations. Now, the top of the cowl, max curvature point, the multiplier is 5.
Mm-hmm.
5. And you can go take a look at a key bearing, for example, you find all the sweep inlets right
Yeah.
on the cowling, where the possible location. What it tells you is at the top of the fuselage, for example, or the top of the wing, on Cessna's where the head is probably, is the absolute responsible place.
Yeah. Horner also does some studies where he looks at the worst place to put a bump on a wing root fairing. And probably the first third, from the leading edge back to about 1/3 or maybe even half, is awful. You can get away with all kinds of stuff from their back, but you want to keep everything else. So if you look at old Messerschmitts, where they had a big bolt, a wing bolt, bump over the wing bolt, the first thing Messerschmitt did when he revised that design for the is it the G model or whatever it is with the big engine and the big round spinner, was eliminate that bump, clean the airplane. So yeah, you can make real mistakes. Horner, I just love them. Do you love them?
Yeah, the only problem with Horner is it's unverified data, most of it. Because it came out of World War II, and there's some controversy as to whether something's real or not,
Just like the what?
just like the non-relayer question.
Yeah, yeah. You're familiar with the question with the controversy over Holmes's boundary layer stuff?
Yeah, and I'm bringing it to an ammunition years ago.
Oh, yeah.
What we found is that the laminate boundary layers are remarkably persistent. This is work that I've seen. They're remarkably persistent.
Especially at low Reynolds numbers.
So
Yeah.
they tend to restabilize and move that pretty.
Yeah. Are you running on up to that next one?
We're there.
Okay, we're there. Just to finish this off, we want to, before we're through here, we want to try to show you how the airplane's built too. But just to sort of sum up all of this stuff, why the airplane goes so fast, we're going to introduce you to Bruce Carmichael here, who was very nice. He came out and looked at the airplane and was thrilled to see the airplane. Thought this was the beginning of a new era. Basically, what the aerodynamicists like about the AR-5 is that it has a very low drag area. It is one of the first airplanes to apparently to get under a square foot of drag area. For those of you who are not familiar with that term, basically what it means is, well, when you think about what its drag area is, it's a term that aerodynamicists use that relates to the square area of a flat plate stuck into the same velocity airstream that my airplane goes. My airplane has the same amount of drag, for example, in pounds, that a flat plate of 0.88 square feet has at that same airspeed. So it's very small. The other thing that you'll see, well, I won't tell you what you're going to see. You can go ahead and see it here. Go ahead, Max. Yeah.
There we go.
Max, this is Max Volume. My friend's been helping me do crazy things for years. Max is a musician by trade, a master guitar player. And for those of you who get to see this whole film, sometime you'll get a chance to hear Max at work. Does a great sound track at the end of both of these films. We crashed the airplane. Last year around, when was it, Max? November or so? Somewhere around there.
That's right.
Let me show you.
I didn't know this was a two-type airplane.
Oh, that we is me and God. That's the royal we. This is the landing gear. The engine quit up over Lake Berryessa when I was doing a high-speed pass down over the lake. Very silly thing to do. And actually what happened was I pulled a little ferrule off of the end of one of the throttle cables, and the ferrule was one that I had soldered on the end of the cable. It got sucked down into the rotary valve. It chewed a bunch off the rotary valve, took a bunch off the case, and ingested all of it and beat itself just to death in there. So I had to land in some very rough territory. I tried to jump over a ditch. I didn't quite make the other side. This bend you see up at the top here, this is where the landing gear is attached to the front of the spar. It used to stick forward like that, and when we were all through, it stuck back like that. It snapped off the axle, twisted up the scissors a little bit, and put the airplane up on its nose, stopped in a very, very short distance. And but no one was hurt. I'm still here. I was ecstatic when I got home. My wife thinks I'm goony because I crashed my airplane and I was just high as a kite, but she didn't understand. I was alive. Well, I lived. So, it's got to be a little goofy to do this kind of stuff anyway. So what I want to show you now is is we've got the airplane back in the shop, and we're repairing the minor damage to the cowl. We're going to repair the landing gear and basically put the airplane back together pretty much the way it was. I was just talking to Ed. Forgot your last name? What? Wishmeyer. About some work that we're doing, just sort of tweaking the airplane up a little bit to get the control feel the way we want it. We're changing the horn balances on the vertical and horizontal stabilizers and changing some of the linkage in the stick and just doing the minor stuff that I didn't do the first time around, putting on some extra little pairings and stuff.
10510, was that it?
Yeah,
Okay,
let me see. 10510. So basically what I want to show you now, the airplane is made essentially, the wing is just about like a long, easy wing. It's, this airplane is hot wired out of styrofoam. The major difference between a long, easy or a very easy kind of construction and my kind of construction is in the fuselage. So I'm going to pick out that part of the airplane that deals with the fuselage and how we make those sandwiches that form the fuselage. And the first thing you need to see is how a sandwich is made, and then we'll show you how the fuselage is made. Hit it.
Here goes.
Okay, you all know what happens next. We put a layer of fiberglass on that. We wind up with a sandwich, in the case of my fuselage, about 0.4 inches thick, with a little bit of fiberglass on the outside. In my case, 2 plies, cross plies of unidirectional glass, the same kind of glass that Rutan uses on his long easies and very easies. And on the inside of the fuselage, through most of the tail cone, there's 1 ply of bidirectional glass. So it's a very thin sandwich. Now we're going to go ahead and show you how we actually, as soon as Max can roll up to that point, how we actually put the fuselage together, and some other little things. And then we're going to, what I'm trying to do is speed this thing along so we have a little bit of time at the end of this for questions and just general discussion. So if you've got questions, hang on a little bit until
Ready to go?
till we get this finished. Okay, here we go. Okay, we've gone through basically the airframe construction. Just a couple of little things that occurred to me that I missed telling you. First off, I designed the airplane not to break a world's record. The world's record sort of was available at the time that the airplane got flying. I knew basically what I was trying to do is make a dogfighter. My boyhood dream. I determined that I wanted to build an airplane with a small engine. Didn't want to power it with an expensive big airplane engine. At the time, 2 strokes were inexpensive. I just got the word from, up until just recently, I was going to put a 75 horsepower 618, Rotax 618 in the airplane. That's this year's new version of the 582, called the 618. Rotax Kodiak Research just called me from Canada a couple of days ago to finally give me the price on this brand new engine. It's $2,000 more than the 582. The 582 is $1,300 more than the 532 that I bought in 1987. So the engine, in my view, is just getting out of hand. I'm going to stick now with the 582. They can have that $6,000 2-cylinder 2-stroke that they're going to try to sell this year. It's too much for me. But the airplane was just designed to be as efficient as possible with a small engine, and the record happened to be available. The record at the time that I got my airplane flying was 200 miles an hour, being held by a guy with a BD-5 in Austria. So I knew my airplane would do well over 200 miles an hour, and it just went for it. So, do we have any questions? It's starting to get, it's almost 10 o'clock here. Sir?
A few comments about the solid.
The propeller is done by Craig Cato, who I knew way back 10 or 15 years ago as a guy who made very good ultralight propellers. Craig, as you may know, has now been building propellers for Formula One airplanes, and Craig and I got together because I had read an article by, let's see if I can remember this gentleman's name, Mr. Larrabee, Dr. Larrabee from MIT, who is the propeller guru. And he has some interesting ideas about pitch distribution out toward the tip and modifying the pitch distribution to take into consideration the fuselage shape. So we've tailored this propeller 50-inch diameter by 70-inch pitch with a 2-to-1 gearbox. So we're turning the propeller about, the engine turns 6,500 peak power. We're turning the propeller about 3,250. Sir?
How many blades?
2. Just a little wooden propeller. But next year, when we get the airplane flying again, my only criticism about the performance of this airplane, I'm tickled to death with the way it flies. It's great. Except below 110 miles an hour, where it falls below, the RPM falls below the Rotax's power curve, and the performance just goes to hell. It'll hardly get off the ground. Well, I'm exaggerating. It'll get off the ground. I can get in and out of 2,000-foot strips, but it's very sluggish. So we're going to put a CGS variable pitch propeller on it next time. I've flown the airplane with a little short test club, which allowed the engine to develop pretty good horsepower static, and take off an initial rate of climb were great. So I want that back again. I'm going to get it with this new constant speed or variable pitch propeller. That's the major change that's going to happen. My interest from now on with the airplane is not to prove that the airplane is fast, and we've already shown that. We want next year to let some other people fly it. I think the airplane handles great. Well, we've got volunteers, thanks. Thanks, you guys, I appreciate it. We're talking to Peter Garrison about doing a little report on the airplane and some other folks. So we're going to try to demonstrate to people that the airplane handles better than most. Any more questions, sir?
Yeah, could you tell me something about your insulation you put on the muffler system?
It's a product called a product from a company called Thermotech. It's some stuff that the NASCAR guys use. It's a woven, apparently a ceramic fiber, comes in tape form, 2 inches wide. It's about 1/8 of an inch thick, and it's just, you wet it. It's got a starch-like binder in it. You get it damp and wrap it around the exhaust system as tightly as you can. When it dries, it sort of hardens up on it. And then they give you a spray can with some high-temperature silver paint that you soak it with, and it hardens up even further. And I'm sort of in cahoots with some race car guys in Berkeley who have since tried it on their, I think it's an Alfa Romeo race car, and they swear that the driver now doesn't get his feet burned when he puts his feet on the firewall. It works very well. In my case, it was a necessity because the plenum through which all the air that's going to eventually wind up going out through the radiators goes past the exhaust system, or at least it did in the original configuration. And I wanted to try to radiate as little heat into that air that was going to be the radiator coolant air as possible, and it worked. So it's good stuff. Thermotech.
Any trouble with the cowling overheating?
If you look at the cowl in light, you can see that it's sort of rippling a little bit, but nothing's melted, no paint is blistered. It's deformed like it's an epoxy cowl, room cure epoxy cowl, so it's not good for anything over about 160 or 170 degrees. But it seems to be surviving. It's got 75 hours on it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Sir.
Let's talk about cooling drag. Take any special steps to try to reduce cooling drag?
Gee, I wish we could show you this whole movie. When I originally designed the airplane, those of you who have seen this article have seen that there's a spinner on the airplane. I determined the inlet area based on a formula used on air-cooled engines, about 1/4 of an inch per horsepower of inlet area, which is quite small. It's at the low end of what's acceptable in an air-cooled engine. When we couldn't keep the spinner on the airplane and finally flew it without it, we discovered that it went just as fast with that great gaping hole up there. Of course, it's what's happening is it's a stagnation point, and it's forming its own fairing there. So the guys in the B-29s and the P-47s and the old radial engine airplanes knew what they were doing when they didn't put spinners on it. Doesn't make a heck of a lot of difference. The outlet area is based on that inlet area formula, and it's about 25% greater than the area that we were using for inlet. Bruce Carmichael has done a complete drag breakdown in the airplane. He thinks it's somewhere between 8 and 12% of the total drag of the airplane, which on a clean airplane that's pretty darn good. And it pulls okay. What we're going to try to do is close up the exit area a little bit more next time around and see what that does. But we're not going to do anything to the inlet. We're happy. I can get in there and see all the fluid levels without taking the cowl off and pre-flight the airplane without taking the cowl off.
So the inlet area is too small, the exit area is too large.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where we are. So we're going to close up the exit area a little bit and see what we get. Sir.
I read you mentioned the Amtrak 400. Do you know what happened to that? And can you explain how they got that beautiful finish on it?
Well, got the beautiful finish on it because I broke my back sanding on it. It's how it happened. The Avtec 400 was as you saw in the pictures, was an aircraft that was developed in Camarillo by a company called Avtec. It was a prototype for a twin turboprop pusher, canard pusher, that was supposed to compete with the Starship, basically. It's a little smaller. And the prototype, they just had funding problems, and as far as I know, the prototype has been shifted around the country to various hangars, and I think the project has pretty much died. Too bad. I've worked on a lot of those projects. Sir?
What happened with Muller's?
There's another. As far as I know, the flight test vehicle, which I built in finished up in 87 or 88, is still unpainted in the hangar where I last saw it 4 years ago. And they have also had funding problems, and he's working on on the technical side. The airplane is ready to go, but he doesn't have the engines and the hardware yet. So I somehow am attracted to dreamers. I love them, and it's been fun. Any other questions? Sir? We used the stock, what's called the can, which is a muffler, basically a combination muffler and expansion chamber, and we used all of the stock dimensions, but we couldn't get the stock system into the cowl. So we had to, found some tubes in an aftermarket expansion chamber that was roughly the same size, and we modified it, welded some wedges in and developed it. But it's basically a reshaped stock system. But same volume, but we got into trouble in the expansion chamber, which is the most difficult part of it to make. The diameter wasn't right, so we, instead of making it a larger diameter with a round cross section, we had to make an oval, a flat oval. And so we think we've lost some efficiency in the reflected charge, which is the thing that makes two-strokes work. So I suspect that the engine wasn't developing to full 65 horsepower. This time, when we put the engine back in the airplane, we're going to take it to my race car buddy's dyno and make sure it's putting out 65 horsepower. The 65 horsepower is real important to me because the aerodynamicists are all doing their calculations on drag based on the horsepower I'm telling the airplane the engine's putting out. And they don't believe me. They think it's putting out more. They think I must have pumped the engine up or something. So this time we want to show them. Next year we're going to try to figure out some way to do some really verifiable speed runs. I was talking to somebody here earlier about the problem we've had with this world record attempt is that the FAI rules allow you to descend through the course, which, I mean, what does that show you? You know, that sure isn't telling anybody what the top speed of the airplane is. The top speed on my airplane is not 213, which is what I set. It's 207. I picked up about 6 miles an hour descending through the course. I didn't want to do it, but the NAA official said if I'm going to be in the game, I might as well play it like everybody else. And so I did descend a little bit through the course. But next year we want to get some real, honest to God, top speed figures for the airplane. So.
How much faster do you think it'll go?
Well, I don't think it'll go any faster.
Really?
Yeah, I think 207 with 65 horsepower is just about fast enough. But basically what I want to do is make it take off and climb like a real fighter. And I know I can get at least 15 to 1,800 feet a minute. So if I can do that, I'll be chasing these RV4 guys around. I've already have had a little dogfight with an RV4 with 160 horsepower and a constant speed, so I love it.
What kind of stall speed and approach speed do you find?
My approaches are at about 80 miles an hour. The stall is clean, about 56, and with full flaps, about 53. So the airplane is really not a racer. It's a real gentle sport plane. Questions?
If you have a vacuum pump under in the gyros,
Don't have any. It's just a basic VFR panel. Any more?
Invite you back to bring the airplane sometime.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to. I intend to do some airport. So you guys are on my list.
We'd like to see it.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.